Jai Jagannath. Let me compliment and congratulate the organizers of this conclave, and particularly for choosing all of us to be part of a group discussion on contribution of Dr. Harikrishna Mahtab to Odia journalism. And perhaps you have noticed we four on the dais, except Professor Suresh ji. But I dare not say that. But if you stretch a little bit, all of us have links with Odia journalism. You must be wondering, Mr. Ruben Banerjee spent a lot of time in Orissa, and he has come back to Orissa in a new avatar. So he is very much part of Odia journalism as such. Sandeep Sao, one time a colleague of mine, and today is a freelance journalist contributing to various media and is very active. And Professor Nahak, as he himself admitted, and I'm very happy to be reminded of that, spent little time with our media outfit. And Professor Suresh stands out to be the only exception, but he has the greatest connection with Odia and Odisha because he has married a Odia girl from Cuttack. So therefore all connections are well placed. I do not want to waste much of time in giving you an introduction to the topic. Anybody who knows anything about Dr. Harikrishna Mahtab, I think if I say that Orissa has a peculiar distinction of bringing some kind of repute or disrepute to the profession of journalism, in one sense, why I say this is politics, journalism, and literature. The three areas have converged in one person, and there are many examples of this. And perhaps Dr. Harikrishna Mahtab leads the list. He was a politician, he was a freedom fighter, he was also a pioneer of a newspaper that is Prajatantra, and he also brought about tremendous changes through this newspaper in literature. We people in literature normally do not think very highly of journalists, and they perhaps always believe that journalists cannot be equated with literary people. At best, journalism is literature in a hurry, as they really say so. But with Dr. Harikrishna Mahtab, I'm sure everybody will have to change their mind about how can journalists be part of the literary world. So to me, I will share some personal experiences with him in my closing remarks. I would not like to spend more time on that, but Dr. Harikrishna Mahtab is perhaps today, 125 years ago, he was born, and we are celebrating his 125th birthday. I'm happy and I'm grateful to the government of Orissa and India for choosing to celebrate this birthday in a befitting manner. And day before yesterday, you may be knowing, he was honored and a special coin was inaugurated in his honor. But I must hasten to add that it took 125 years for the government of India, or for that matter, government of Orissa, to recognize that this man deserves to be recognized in this fashion. And as a journalist, with a little pinch of salt, I would say it took 125 years to recognize Harikrishna Mahtab's talent and the contribution to Odia journalism, or it needs to be said, hasten to add that one need to come to power to be able to recognize the great talent that is behind Dr. Hare Krishna Mahatma. अगर सत्ता में परिवर्तन नहीं होता, शायद महताब को ये कॉइन भी मिलना मुसीब नहीं होता. To pose few questions to yourself, particularly those who want to pursue a career in media, and while talking about contribution of Dr. Hare Krishna Mahatma's contribution to Odia journalism, one thing strikes me: he was ahead of his times. Ruben ji was talking about perhaps Mahatma would have been a misfit today with his ideology, with his what he thought about the world and thought about politics and the freedom movement and whatever. But I would also like to present to you Dr. Hare Krishna Mahatma as somebody who was ahead of his times. And I would like to recollect one personal experience of mine. I have very fond memories of my interaction, both good and bad, with Dr. Hare Krishna Mahatma. We were competitors. Can you imagine son-in-law of a chief minister is launching a newspaper, and a close collaborator of Dr. Hare Krishna Mahatma, Janaki Ballabh Patnaik, who was the editor of Prajatantra for 17 years before he left and entered into politics and became the chief minister. So, and the Prajatantra was supposed to be pro J.B. Patnaik, and Samaj was not so happy with J.B. Patnaik's government. So Prajatantra and Samaj, they were loggerheads. One supporting the government, the other was not so very pleased with the government. Here comes another son-in-law who launches a newspaper. And I did not know anything about newspaper at that point of time. I had a hell of a job to sustain it. At that time, I ran a series, interview with VIPs in the politics. Do you know what was the headline of my interview with Dr. Hare Krishna Mahatma? It was in Oriya. Durnitiku niti karidele sabu samasyara samadhan heijiva. When there was a lot of talk about Biju Patnaik's corruption, Biren Mitra's corruption, Prajatantra, if you look at old copies of Prajatantra, it was anti-Biju Patnaik. And lo and behold, Biju Babu was one of the fundraisers for Prajatantra in his very bad days. He was the manager. And so if somebody, at one point of time, somebody questioned me, who is a better or more successful person in the media world? Dr. Hare Krishna Mahatma or Dr. Radhanath Rath? I had voted for Radhanath Rath. And I will tell you why. You can understand why. Radhanath Rath was more successful as a media person. Hare Krishna Mahatma is a very successful person as a hero, as a leader. Because Radhanath Rath is only a matriculate. Gopabandhu Das gave him this newspaper. While he was his private secretary or PA, whatever you know. And he ran the show for so many years and sustained the newspaper for how many years? 1919 to until he was dead, about almost 80-90 years. Hare Krishna Mahatma had Biju Patnaik as his fund manager, J.B. Patnaik as his editor, Nilamani Rautrai as his errand boy, Biren Mitra as his hawker, and all the literary people at that point of time in Orissa, where he is in the editorial desk. With all these talents that is available in Orissa, he was running a newspaper. And because of that, that newspaper became something different. Today we are talking about feature journalism. Why was Prajatantra successful at all? It was successful because it was involved in politics, it was involved in literature, it was involved in language movement, it was involved in children's literature. There was one Mina Bazaar to integrate the children to get into reading habits and organizing themselves. there was a Vishwamillan which collected all the literary people in the state once in a year to celebrate the cause of Odia literature. And he was doing politics. And Prajatantra, when he was doing politics, was the pro-government. When he was out of power, it was the spokesperson of the opposition. So what I mean to say is, and when he said this, at that time, you young people were very furious. What the hell he is speaking? He's supporting corruption. He's championing corruption. Dunniti ko niti karidale. Today, if you go back and read that interview, you will find how true he was. What is today in politics? This is all about money, how to win election. And he knew how to win election left, right and center. He never lost any election in his life. Any one of us who are in politics have won and lost in equal measure. But he is the one who did not lose a single election. कुछ तो होगा उसमें जिसमें कि उसको पता रहता है कैसे जीतते हैं इलेक्शन. So he was very ahead of his times. So I would like to close. He was a great man. He was a very successful person. He knew what he was doing, and he knew that the role of a newspaper is not only to disseminate news, it is only to connect people and integrate people through the development of language. Look at his prose. His prose is simply scotch on the, they say, scotch on the rocks. It simply flows. It doesn't, you need not worry about his prose. His prose is so common. A common man with elementary knowledge will understand his prose better. And it was said, Aji Gam Majlisre Kaun Bharji. One single column used to change the opinion of the whole state at some point of time. The student movement of 1960 was championed by this newspaper. All the leaders of Orissa, in literature, in politics, in sports, in other things. Can you think of a situation in which in those days he had a film critic column? Lot of people said, ये क्या है? Heroine का photo निकालने से अखबार थोड़ी चलता है. Lot of people have different ideas about newspaper, what it should do and what it should contain. But Dr. Harikrishna Mahatab had a modern outlook. The newspaper should have features, should have information, should integrate people, should also talk about the political issues. But to me, he was ahead of his times, and language is the real contribution that a newspaper can make. A Odia language, when it was under stress, like Fakir Mohan Senapati, and in the modern times, the language and literature was served by the newspaper. Therefore, I think this great man, although we are opposed to each other, we fought with each other because he thought, I have come as a sultan, because he was already having the privileges of the government, and the son-in-law of a chief minister launching a newspaper, all the advertisements will come to the government, all the facilities will come to me, but I was not in that mold. Therefore, I owe my success to Dr. Harikrishna Mahatab because we were fighting with each other. And that first interview he gave to our newspaper, I was interviewing him myself, that Durniti ko niti koridale, sabu samasyar samadhan hai jibo. That is why I tell him, I want to present him as a person ahead of his times. Thank you.